Travel Support Thursday. We're back. It's
Number
Thursday.
17.
Welcome back to Travel Thursday.
Travel Thursday.
I still hate this jingle.
Josh is wearing a button-up shirt.
Well, look at how yeah, it is Christmas time around here, and I'm looking full-on Wisconsin today for sure.
I will say thank you so much to everybody who loves the jingle, as cringy and awkward as it is, because, yeah, that's why I love it too.
God.
I mean, I know it's not good. No one's claiming that
It'll
it's
never win a Grammy. It'll never
Grammy worthy. It's just Lisa and Josh. I don't know. We've been playing around with the idea of just like, maybe I'll go home and keyboard it and see maybe if it's just a humming sound.
I've paid some guys on Fiverr to make some options of it, and no matter how hard they try, it still sounds so stupid. I think it's just the concept of it. It's not their fault either. It's just the concept of it is just okay. All right. Anyway,
Here we go.
Today I think we've got a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about today. We've also got some deep stuff that honestly we're terrified a little bit to talk about, but I think that makes
Just
it a good
important
subject.
stuff.
But anyway, why don't you give them the rundown?
So today we're going to talk about travel across Europe, how we get local and I guess not local, but country news, like when you're traveling and how that impacts our travels. We're going to talk about our plans for future trips, if any of them include other continents. We're also going to talk about the idea of country counting and if there are any destinations that are on the top of our bucket list.
Yeah, like competitive travel, the absurdity of it. Sure.
And finally, we're going to be talking about I don't even know how to talk about this. We're going to talk about sustainability as it relates to travel because
Right.
yeah, we know travel has a huge impact on our environment and our carbon footprint. We'll talk about, what it means to us and what we think about it because it is a really important concept. Okay, let's get into it. So our first question comes from Michael, who says, we're in Europe right now with a train strike for the next couple of days. It was a surprise, but with no local news available, it started making me think, how in the world do you get local and country news as you travel, or do you just play it by ear?
Man, that's become an almost annual thing by now. I mean, I remember last year when we were there,
in Germany.
I think there were 2 different train strikes happening while we were there. One in France and then one happening in Germany at the same time, like overlapping.
I feel like every time we go to Europe, there's a train strike.
Right.
But in that's good, in some ways, because hopefully the workers are getting, what they deserve, but also like they have trains. So that's also an awesome thing. And we're not used to trains in the U.S.
That seems cool. I am all for paying train operators and the people who upkeep all of that awesome stuff as much as they deserve, probably even more than that, because I don't know. I can't imagine Europe without them. I can't imagine traveling without going on trains frequently. Yeah. So I think, in short, we don't. we don't. This is an intentional thing that we do.
I mean, it's not that we avoid it. It's just that it doesn't. I don't know. We don't. Like you said, it's always a little bit challenging to get news about a strike when you're a tourist or you're visiting, unless like someone like your hotel or you happen to be at the train station getting your tickets and they alert you. I actually think the only reason we knew about the train strikes last year
because we were riding the trains every day.
Well, and our friends who are German, when we were traveling in Germany on the €9 ticket, they told us about it.
Right, that's true. They're like, oh, aren't you worried about the train strikes? We're like, the what?
I think the way that we got alerted was actually through like our friends and also using some of the train apps, actually.
Yeah.
We started noticing that like all the local trains, for example, were super jam-packed and all the local trains were like mega delayed. And then we're like, what's going on? And then we looked up the news. Yeah.
I mean, usually if it's important enough or it affects a lot of people in some way, we'll find out from the hotel we're staying at or otherwise. But the short of it is that we don't.
No.
We don't. And some of that is that we want to like maintain at least a small amount of either ignorance or innocence about the news that's happening in there because we just don't want to get caught up in it. We just want to like take the place for what it actually is and the thing that we're actually experiencing like in that moment instead of trying to like getting caught up in the problems of a country as a whole that will probably like color our experience in some negative way.
In general, I would say that we don't proactively reach out and read the news when we're traveling in a local place. But when we're out walking about, when we're at the train station, we notice something peculiar, we notice something that catches our attention, that will prompt us to look something up later.
Sure.
And sometimes that can give us insight. Like when we were in Seoul, for example, we left the palace one day and we saw tons of protesters, and we just had no idea what the protests were about. And that to me was like an interesting thing, and I just wanted to know what the protests were about, so I looked it up. I don't remember what it was about. I think it was about the president. We generally like to play it by ear because we want to just see what happens as we travel. I know there's a lot of planning that goes into these trips, but sometimes we find that the more that we read, the more it takes us away from the actual place that we're in.
Yeah, like, have you ever been to a subreddit for a country or a city? Like, just go and look at any subreddit for any city on planet Earth, and all that you'll find is just, like, endless negativity and complaining. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in that. And you enter this, like, state of fear before you even arrive at a place. And I think we intentionally try to avoid that in some ways, because I just don't want it to like change our perspective of a place before we get there. I just want to take it as it comes.
If you are the kind of person that wants to know everything and wants to know information, I actually find that not looking at the like local news to be very helpful. I actually find Reddit and YouTube to be the most helpful, or social media. Those that are like live on the ground reporting actual anecdotal stories about what's happening is actually really helpful.
Yeah. Okay, what do we got next? What's the next question?
So our next question comes from Rachel Lenahan. Hey, Rachel.
Yep.
Who asks, do you guys count your countries visited? If so, what are your numbers? Would you ever consider setting the goal of going to every country in the world, or does traveling to check boxes make you cringe? Also, what country is at the top of your bucket list?
So as an elder millennial, could you just define the word cringe for me? Because from like the way I understand it, it just means anything that makes you feel like slightly uncomfortable. So, you know, like it seems like this one-dimensional thing, like things are either cringe or not cringe, and everything that's cringe should just be thrown away and burned, and everything that isn't cringe is like acceptable, but things that aren't cringe are like 2% of humanity.
Are cringeworthy things that get you canceled?
Yeah, I don't know, because there's nothing really in this world that makes me go, ugh.
Really? There has to be.
No.
What about too much time on the beach?
I mean, no, but that just makes me uncomfortable, but it doesn't make me go, ugh.
So maybe that's the definition of cringe.
Yeah, or is it more about like things that you think other people will think badly about you if you do?
I think it's more that cringe I think of as when... No, let's just look it up.
But I feel like that's going to be less helpful than cringed. I mean,
and we have to look up the
I understand
Urban
the
Dictionary.
idea of cringing.
So the actual definition of cringe is bend one's head and body in a fear of apprehension or in a servile manner, which is what you were just doing.
We're looking at Merriam-Webster for this. There's nothing more millennial.
Oh, this one. Have an inward feeling of acute embarrassment or awkwardness. I feel like that's what it is.
I just don't ever really, I mean, not never, but very infrequently do I get embarrassed. So I'm probably being cringe most of the time, but I just don't care. So therefore I'm not cringe. I don't know. It seems like such a catch-all, you know, it's like something being cool or not cool. Like there's some judge group out there that decides if things are cringe or not cringe. And then that decides if you're allowed to be on the internet or not.
I think the difference between cringe and like,
how do we get caught on this?
Being embarrassed is like, cringe seems like the term that someone has for somebody else.
Or right? like that's cringe.
I'm embarrassed for you.
Right.
Which is like kind of sad.
Yeah, but why?
I know.
But why would you care so much? Like if somebody else is doing something that's cringy, just let them do it. Like that doesn't affect me at all if they're doing something weird. Like I look at it and go, well, that was kind of weird. And then you just move on with your life. I don't go, and make a whole thing. I don't understand this.
Well, and there's also probably certain levels of
I've
cringe.
never felt more old.
When does it, what's the different levels of cringe? Like there has to be like slightly cringe and then
Omega cringe.
Omega cringe, or is it anyway?
Right.
Back to the original
Okay,
question.
back to the
Sorry
question.
for
God,
detracting.
please enlighten
Rachel.
us on this, because it feels like such a catch-all,
Okay.
nebulous term that if somebody out there, if maybe just me asking for a definition of this is cringe, but to be honest, I just want to know. I just want to be enlightened.
I would say that our jingle makes you cringe.
Yeah, but is it good cringe? Because I'm hearing from people out there that they like it, so it might be like positive cringe. Is that possible?
I don't know. This is too philosophical.
I have
for me.
never felt more old in my life than
Here
I
we
do right
go.
now trying to
Let's
understand
get back
this.
to the original question. So,
nebulous
Rachel
term.
asks, do you guys count your countries visited? And if so, what are your numbers? So I would say...
I mean, it's like 70 something. I know
Oh.
off of like the top of my head, because I think this number used to be really important to my ego. And I think that as time has gone on, that I've cared less and less about it over time.
Got it. I would say I don't know the number. I know it's probably not more than 30.
Mm-hmm.
But I do keep a list of all the places that we've gone, just so that for memory's sake. In general, I don't. And I think to your question, would you, does traveling to check boxes make you cringe?
Okay, so do I?
Or not?
No,
Okay, never mind. I'm not going to use that word anymore.
Outside of the word cringe, like, do I think that other people being proud of how many countries they've gone to or how many cool things they've seen, do I think that that's somehow like weird or bad for them? No, I think that that's
not necessarily.
I don't know,
Yeah.
like, be into whatever you're into.
Some might say that making YouTube videos and documenting our travels is cringeworthy.
Yes,
but
lots of people seem to think that.
I guess
Maybe you right now.
well, no, only if we sing the jingle.
Travel thirst.
I guess to get back to your original questions, no, we don't really count our numbers, but I don't really feel like, to me, I know there are a lot of people that have that goal of like reaching a certain number of countries by a certain age, or there's like that Guinness World Record of how many countries you visited by a certain age. That to me has never really been a goal of mine, but I think it's cool that other people do.
Yeah, I think I can tell you for sure something that I do think is cringe is that people like thinking that because they've been to more countries than other people, like I've been to 70 and you've only been to 30, like thinking that for some reason that makes me like better or more experienced or more anything is so vehemently incorrect in like every possible term. And I think this like that competitive travel instinct that I don't know, it seems to exist around the internet kind of prevalently, of like, I've seen more of the world than you, therefore my opinion matters more. That is super Omega cringe for me to see.
I like that you straighten yourself up and like
it's 'cause
stand up and look at the camera when you say Omega cringe.
No, I'm just doing it because my back hurts around here. I think that idea to me is and I think the reason that I cringe about it is that it used to be me. Is that I remember myself after that first trip around the world of feeling like I had done this like big thing, but I was proud of it for the wrong reasons. I was proud of it because of like how much I had done and how much I had learned. Instead of it, kind of the way that I think about more now is that I'm way more proud of the amount of things that I can go and learn and then go and share with a bunch of other people who may not have the opportunity to go and do it. I do understand the impetus of like counting up all these countries and checking off all these boxes and being proud of that because of like the sacrifices you had to make and the things that you had to do to be able to travel to all these cool places. But I will never back anybody who thinks that somehow makes them a better person than anyone else.
For sure.
It's not about that, but I think being proud of an accomplishment of a goal that you set for yourself and then you did, that's really cool.
I think that's more, I think that's interesting, because I think coming from a place of, 10 years ago, I was not remotely into traveling and I was not remotely interested in visiting new countries. And I remember a lot of friends would come back from their summer vacations and they would talk about their time in Spain. They would talk about their time in Budapest and all these different places that I had never been and I could never relate. And I remember at the time feeling inferior because of those conversations. When I look back, and maybe they were just trying to share an experience and like share something cool that they learned about the place, but it was not something that I could relate with at all. So in my head, I thought, oh, I think they're just better than me. And so it is interesting. I think this question makes us, I don't know, makes me want to think about too how we talk about the places that we visited. And I think maybe that's why we don't always talk about like how many places we've gone and where you know, the goal of trying to reach so many countries by a certain age. I think because our goal really isn't to, well, my goal isn't really to like see every country in the world, actually. It's more just to be able to experience new places and new people and learn new things, whether it's all of the countries or not. That'd be awesome. But I think the larger goal, it feels like, is to be able to like get people on board with the idea that traveling introduces you to new things that you would not have known otherwise.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what drives me as well now, is less of like, it used to be, I'm going to be the guy that's gone to every country in the world by the time I'm 30 or 40 or 50 or however long it would have taken. That like, that's my ego. That's my personality talking there. Is that like, that'll be me, and I'll be able to use that to say that I'm cool forever. And then like, you know, I went to 194 countries and I did, and like, just that number, I mean, that is an accomplishment, but I think now I think a lot more about depth of connection to a place than I think about width of like how many places that I went to versus like how many like really deep, unique, cool experiences that I had. And I think with this YouTube thing, it's now a lot more about how many other people can we get in on that party to come and have these other really cool, deep experiences in the same places that we've gone. And that to me is everything now. Like when I see these comments sometimes, and they've been happening more and more frequently, which makes me really excited, of these people saying like, okay, so we saw your video and bam, we booked a flight to Singapore because now we know we can afford it. And that like makes me so happy, so much happier than having gone to 100 countries by the time I was 30 or whatever. Whatever that goal was, being able to actually be able to like share this thing that I know changed my life for the better in so many ways, and to be able to get someone else who might not have been able to do it, or like thought it was prohibitively expensive, or thought there was only one way to make it happen and that would never be accessible to them, and to actually be able to bring them into this party that we're all having together and say like, you're invited and you can do it however you want. And here's how. When we accomplish that feels so good. That feels so good. Way better than saying I went to the Eiffel Tower 73 times.
Well, it's just funny, you know, I think when we look back at a lot of our travels, YouTube and non-YouTube era, we visit countries multiple times. You know, we go back a lot to a lot of places. And I know some people will say, go somewhere new, try and be more spontaneous, be more adventurous. But new countries obviously are really, visiting new places is obviously a huge reason of ours that we want to travel. But there's something special about going back, and I think it goes back to the idea of depth versus width.
For sure.
Going back to a country or a place that we've been before allows us to revisit and relearn some things that we know a little bit about. That's not to say that we don't have interest in visiting newer places. We do. But it's not necessarily, I think, our goal to like check off those places.
Yeah, and perfect example of that here in Japan. Probably my like 12th time being here or something like that. But a new thing that I learned about this time was just how deep and awesome the like vintage thrifting / flea market scene is here, and how incredible the like the stuff we're wearing literally right now, and just how incredibly focused it seems like the people of Tokyo, at least, and probably around the rest of Japan, are on this idea of like taking the old and then turning it into something really cool and really new, and making sure that nothing gets wasted, and making sure that things are reused. What's the word for it?
Motainai.
Motainai, yes.
Multi-nai is actually a term that our our Hawaii mom taught us. It's this Japanese term that essentially translates to like no waste, or reusing and bringing back to life something that, you know, that had a previous life, or not, just no waste. And coming here and staying in this random, we're like on the outskirts of Tokyo. We're not visiting like the popular spots like Shibuya and Asakusa. We're just staying on the outskirts, and it's incredible to see it come to life in action here.
Yeah. And to see it every single day. And it's just this idea of mottainai is something that I think from both of our families was just like this principle that we didn't have a word for, you know, forever. It was like this idea that I think connected us together as two people that were shared values between us, but we didn't have a way to really like codify it. And then,
well, we were cheap too. Also
cheap, yes.
Frugal.
Yes, cheap, mega frugal, but however you want to say it. But
true.
But it was that of like coming to Japan, and this was one of the things that I know that we wanted to both go really deep on and see exactly what the scene was like here. And we had so much fun doing it. We spent like a couple of days just going from flea market to other flea market to other vintage shop. And it was so much fun. And this is something that is so niche and so like wonderful for the two of us, but also like not something that we would have done on our first trip to Tokyo, because we would have been going really wide. We would have been trying to get like a sampler platter of like everything that Tokyo has to offer. But I think this style of travel now, where we have the opportunity and the time, which we're lucky to have, to be able to go really deep on these very specific things that just we love, I think that's amazing. And it's something that makes me really, really happy that I just would have never expected myself to want to get into when I first started this, because I would have been so focused on just seeing everything.
That being said, there are countries on our list that we definitely still want to see and visit. Rachel asks, what country's at the top of your bucket list?
Oh, I think
that's tough.
Nepal, for me, feels like right now, because there's so much cool stuff to do there. I've always wanted to go to Antarctica, not a country, a continent. I've always wanted to go there just to see it. I don't know what I'd do there.
I've always wanted to go to Peru. I know a lot of people have been there. There's actually quite a bit, and we've heard from a lot of you. You know, there's so many places we've yet to visit in this world, and so many countries in South America, Central America, that I'd love to visit and spend a lot of time there. I haven't been to Costa Rica before, Ecuador, Guatemala. I'd
Canada?
love to go
we haven't
to
made
Belize.
We haven't made a video in Canada besides getting on a cruise ship.
That's true.
A lot to cover there.
So many beautiful places. It's hard because I don't really know that I have like these are the must-dos. Do you have like I must do this before I die regarding traveling?
I have the world's longest bucket list. And it's hidden somewhere on our website. I haven't published it yet, but it's like 700 things that I've heard about from other people, or I've read about in books or whatever, and I just keep adding to this list, iterative over time, and just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But I don't know if I die without completing all of them, will I be mad? I mean, like 25-year-old me would have been upset. I would have been like, oh, I blew it. But I think as we're doing this more and more and traveling more and more, I think it's about finding those really specific, really awesome things that are what get me really pumped up about traveling.
Yeah.
Like a couple of days ago, spent an entire day just trying to figure out how this very complex Japanese arcade game works. It's only available like in arcades in Japan. And I went and bought all these like crazy specific cards for it, and then I translated all the menus and everything like that. And that was like the most fun day.
And you made a friend.
Yeah, and I made a friend while I was there who taught me how to play the game and gave me some cards.
So amazing.
It was such a fun day and such a specific thing that I knew that I would love. And the only way that I know that I would enjoy it is by turning off the FOMO of thinking, oh, but I need to go see all this thing and that thing and that thing.
And meanwhile, while he was playing video games, I was visiting all the thrift stores.
She got me this.
And I gotta say, guys, thrift shopping in Japan is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible, and it makes me realize that no matter what country you go to, there's something that you can connect with. Yep. Even if you don't speak the language.
Okay, but I think this idea of mottainai, which is like making sure that everything gets used and making sure that there's no waste, kind of perfectly runs into our next
Yeah.
question, if you can.
Yeah, so we got a really great question and kind of just like concept to cover with from Serios Born 394, who, in summary, who talks a little bit about, you know, the idea of travel and the impact of travel on our environment, right? We know that airplane travel specifically, for example, leaves a carbon footprint. And the more you travel, the more carbon is emitted.
Mm-hmm.
So specifically, they say they would love to know our thoughts on how we balance the cost of the carbon footprint caused by travel. For example, last week, we talked about so many different flights that we had taken in the last couple of months. So yeah, what's our, you know, thoughts on
Sustainable travel, basically. God,
traveling sustainably?
I am terrified to talk about this subject
I'm
in
excited.
so many. I mean, because it seems like whenever this idea of like climate change or sustainability comes up, it feels like there's just two extremes, and it just feels like it's such a contentious topic, in that like it just inevitably leads to people kind of shouting at each other about stuff on the internet, and that's not what I want to have happen.
We won't shout at each other.
It's really it feels like a really scary subject, but I will say that this is a thing that we think about a lot.
Definitely.
This is definitely a topic, and especially after we read this question, this is kind of all we've been talking about for the past like 2 or 3 days, which I guess was the point of the question.
Yeah, I think we recognize and we know that, yes, traveling in certain methods, airplane, cars, you know, they're all bad for the environment. They're all, you know, I don't want to make sweeping generalizations, but yes, it contributes to a carbon footprint. And it led us to do a lot more research, because while we do generally know that travel and a lot of things that we do in our daily lives impacts our climate in a negative way, we didn't know how much. So it turns out, yeah, we found this pie chart, and it turns out there are a couple of things that like are big players. So transport makes up like 16%, you know, road transport, aviation, shipping. And what I was surprised by, so aviation makes up 2% of the entire pie. Road transport makes up 12%, which I mean, I guess maybe just by sheer number of cars there are and motorbikes there are in the
They're also
roads.
super inefficient. Like generally it's like one person in one car, one person on one motorbike driving. So it's way less efficient than, you know, than most other things. Like rail down here is like 0.4% of
which
the total.
Still emits, you know. Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I feel like this overwhelming hopelessness growing over time of like, I'm trying my best over time to not give in to this like learned hopelessness, that I feel like no matter what I do, it's never going to have like an effect on this. Because when I see that like all these things that I have zero control over are like 80+% of the pie, I just look at that. I'm like, oh God, does any of it, is there any real way to change the track that we're on? I don't know. It's just been feeling hopeless, and I'm trying really hard to not give in to that, into that hopelessness.
Yeah, I do think that was one of the like biggest things that came from our conversation. And then the biggest differences, like, I think your question is a very valid one, especially because we do this now for our jobs, right? We travel for work and we travel for fun too. Part of that, unfortunately, means that we are traveling frequently. We wish we had unlimited time to travel at a slower pace, to stay in places for a longer time. We wish we had unlimited budget, but also how do we do it in a better way? We know, like, specifically our last trip, yes, was indeed very fast, and we recognize the benefits of slow travel, not just on the environment, but on our, like, personally, you know, it's a good idea to take things slower and to be able to really, like we talk about, get into the depths of a place versus width, and versus checking things off our list. And I think certainly one of the things that we could do better is traveling slowly or slower. Yeah. We do try to, as much as possible, to take trains or buses. We try not to rent a car. Like in Vietnam, you know, the way to get around is certainly motorbike, but they have plenty of motorbikes on the road. And I think
It's definitely had some negative effects on their environments as well that we felt very, tangibly while we were in Hanoi and Saigon, where like air quality was like 240 and it was hard to breathe and you couldn't see the sun, and it was just
like when we were talking with this friend that we met about his decision to not take planes anywhere. We were talking about just general things that we try to do, and one of the things that like is really important to me, for example, that may not be important for a lot of other people, is we try as much as possible to shop secondhand. And I was telling him this, but then it feels like sometimes when you look at, I don't even know why I use this example, but like I just saw in the news that they were talking about the Met Gala and how much they spent on throwing the Met Gala, but then all of the cost of designing, all the clothes that all these celebrities were wearing. And it was millions of dollars. And then I thought to myself, why do I thrift shop?
Why do I even bother?
Why do I buy $2 clothes? And those moments.
And it's so easy to feel that way, and it takes so much energy to combat that hopelessness.
It's tough. And I think there's so many different ways that someone can travel more sustainably and more responsibly. But I feel like the thing that we left that conversation with our friend with was, find the thing that you feel like you can do. I don't mean to make a pun, but sustainably, that you can keep doing, that feels right for you, that feels good for you, and feels like you're helping.
I don't know. I'm such a pragmatic person, and I feel like that's really unhelpful when it comes to trying to think about this like environmental problem. Because like the logical part of my brain, when I look at this like global greenhouse gas emissions overall in the world, and I see that the other like 90+% of it is stuff that I have absolutely no control over, so therefore I should do nothing. And that's like the logical part of my brain thinks about that. But then the other part of my brain that's also like kind of logical but also just doesn't just want to like give up on this entirely starts to think maybe a little more optimistically about this problem, that says like, okay, if just I do the stuff that's in my control as good as I can, and if I can just like recycle the stuff that I can recycle, and if I can take care and like take trains whenever I possibly can and avoid taking unnecessary flights whenever I can, or take more direct flights,
or not rent a car,
not rent a car, walk whenever I can. You guys know how much we love walking on this channel. We did it across the Camino twice. Like, if just I can do the things that are in my control and just kind of ignore the bigger part of the noise and ignore all this other stuff that's outside of my control and just take care of the things of myself, then I won't become hopeless and I won't give up.
And there's so many variables in how people travel and how people like to travel. And because of all the different variabilities and all the different ways that we think about this, there's so many different ways that we can travel more sustainable. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think something you said 2 days ago was, I think, the key to unlocking it in my head of how to not look at this pessimistically, but how to look at it optimistically. And it was your analogy to voting
in the U.S.
Yes, where it feels like voting in the U.S., it can be really easy to look at just like, oh, there's like, 70 million people are voting, so therefore my vote will not matter.
Well, and also if you count the Electoral College, which for those of you that don't live in the U.S.,
maybe
don't worry about it. But the Electoral College is just like, what?
It can be so easy to feel disenfranchised. But also, when you look at the results of these elections, they like come down to a difference of like a couple of thousand votes so frequently that really each individual vote does count. But when you're like casting it, you're just like, whatever, like none of this is going to matter. Maybe I shouldn't even vote at all. But these like greenhouse gas emissions, and I think everything like that is going to come down to each individual person just trying their best to just do as good as they can in a realistic way without getting too overwhelmed and without going too far and without becoming like too, without having too much of like a gap being put between like what's good or bad, and just having people try their best over a long period of time. And that'll tilt it over to maybe us doing the right thing.
Look at you coming back around and feeling optimistic.
Maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to make it there but it'll all come down to people not becoming hopeless and people not giving up over a long period of time, and just a whole bunch of people trying their best, and maybe things will turn out okay.
Yeah.
And it can feel so easy to get hopeless. Believe me, I oscillate between that and then optimism of seeing like maybe we'll be able to science ourselves out of this problem and solve greenhouse gases with all these cool things we've been seeing lately, like these electric ferries that are about to, I think in the United States and Sweden.
We also saw some electric tuk-tuks in Bangkok, which is really cool.
And these like cool, sustainable, I think they run on cooking oil airplanes, like the first ever one just won a couple of weeks ago. And I see all these things and I start to become a little more optimistic over time, where I'm like, maybe we'll be able to science ourselves out of this problem.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I see on here is travel as maybe another way for us to reduce these total greenhouse gas emissions, because I think travel kind of helps people change their mindset towards these things. See like, oh, that's where this is going. Now I understand it, that maybe, just maybe, travel will have a chance at helping us all kind of change our mindset on this. That gives me a little bit of optimism and reduces that hopelessness that I've been feeling.
That being said, I want to share 2 pieces of good information.
Oh, okay. All right. We need some optimism. I feel like optimism.
In the first one, did you know that in the U.S. now, we are going to have our first ever high-speed rail?
Ooh.
From Los Angeles to Las Vegas, which is very big news.
That's so exciting. See, and like the skeptical part of me is like, I've heard this story before. I'm not going to fall for it again.
No,
but I hope we do it.
They think before the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. But the thing that caught my eye was the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, PDB, specifically said that it was he quoted going to Hiroshima for the G7 summit. And he said, you come home thinking, why can't we have something like that? I've
thought this so many times. Just riding one train here and you're like, this is awesome and this is how I want to get around forever.
So
that sounds awesome.
We know we've got to change that. That's what we're doing.
I love seeing that.
That makes me so... I saw that and that was a shocker.
Having high-speed rail, especially between Los Angeles and Vegas, like people go between those and it's like a 4-hour drive and nobody should have to make that drive because it's awful and boring and it'd be a perfect place for a train. It's just like desert in the middle there.
Second piece of good news. There is a 2024 calendar that is free featuring adorable TSA dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get a copy in the link in the description below.
No matter how you feel about the TSA, you got to be able to get behind the super cute, good doggos.
Doing their great little jobs.
Your face is in the way.
Yeah. There they are. So you can download that, and it's completely free. Thanks, TSA.
Yep. So when you get too overwhelmed or sad about the state of the world, just go look at cute pictures of dogs. I'm pretty sure everyone does that. I'm pretty sure that's a universal experience. I want to say thank you very much for this question, because it started a lot of conversations between us. And we went back and forth on it in a lot of different ways, and hopefully it'll start more conversations out there of the people who are watching this.
Tell us what you do, what your favorite way of being sustainable while traveling looks like. Thanks for tuning in. Leave us some questions in the comments below and let us know your thoughts.
Yep. All right.
Bye.
See you then. Thanks so much for the question. Bye.